Hey, welcome everybody. This is Distance Learning with Common Sense Education, and I'm Melissa Cleaver. I'm our Common Sense Outreach Manager in Omaha Public Schools and the state of Nebraska. And today we have Bob Reeker with us. He's a longtime friend of mine and former coworker in a sense. We collaborated a lot within the arts since I came from an arts background myself. And we are here to talk about why do kids need art more than ever before. And just so everybody's aware, this will be recorded for our YouTube series, and so you can look out for links to some of the resources that we're going to discuss in the chat below on YouTube. So with no further ado, hey Bob, can you just kind of share with everybody else? I know you pretty well, but can you give us a little background on where you're at, what you're doing, and how things going for you?
You bet. Well, speaking of background, I know a few people have been asking about the collage that's behind me. It's actually a piece I created for an art show I was in. It's actually hanging right now at the Noise Art Gallery in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska. So just a reflection of using kids' art and using the rainbow as kind of a symbol for child development. So, well, my background is that I'm a 30-year veteran of Lincoln Public Schools, spent 28 of those in the elementary art room, 2 of those as an administrator, went back to the classroom, and currently I'm teaching at a Title I school in downtown Lincoln. I have about 350 students, and when all of this remote learning started happening, LPS formulated this idea that we would spend 2 weeks on review of materials, and then the last 7 weeks we would create new content. And for the art department, everything was done through our art consultant, Lorinda Rice. And so that is how we provided all the information through Google Classroom, through things online. Local TV stations have picked up a lot of the instruction for us. So that's where we are within my own district. Now, I also teach an adjunct course at Nebraska Wesleyan University, the Elementary Art Methods course, and we too went online, of course, like most everybody across the nation, and we were asked to teach both synchronous as well as asynchronous learning, focusing on asynchronous, I always pronounce that incorrectly, asynchronous learning, just because we knew so many people would have such different lives. We were encouraged to record information, put it online, provide our assignments through different Blackboard, other Canvas, other kinds of things in order to make sure that people had what they needed. My other part of my background then is my leadership pieces. I was very fortunate to serve on the National Art Education Association National Board in 2 different ways. And then I'm currently, in July, going to become the elect for the Nebraska Art Teachers Association, my second time around. So I'm jumping back into the presidency for a second time.
And I'm sure Nebraska is thrilled to have you back in that role. So.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that. And then finally, very fortunate to be working closely with Dr. Trina Harlow, who's from Kansas State University, who's moving to Arkansas. And she started an online group March 11th. And it's titled Online Art Teachers K-12. It's Facebook, and we currently also have a website. So it's a great resource for teachers in order to go in and find out things about advocacy, lessons, things like that. So there's lots of resources out there. You got to go out and find them.
Yeah, well, we'll be sure to add that one into our chat or into our resources for after the show. So thanks for giving us a little background. And I think I'd be remiss if I don't do a quick little Go Big Red. Anybody that's on here from Nebraska would probably, hey, why aren't you giving a shout out for that?
Better show my shirt while I'm here, right?
There we go. Love it.
Right there.
So let's go ahead. We were kind of talking the other day about this, and, I noticed like right as soon as we jumped into this whole new way of living, this new reality that we have, that it seemed to me it was the artists that were kind of first to jump in and start doing things. Like on my Facebook feed, a good friend of mine, Red Grammer, child musician, he started creating these online spaces so kids could come join and have a space. I know that there's some other visual artists that have done some same things like on YouTube, different things. And even just your everyday person started turning towards the arts just like immediately. Who's the other one? John Krasinski from The Office with his So Good News or Some Good News.
Yes.
I mean, and immediately even his kids were involved because they created his logo that went with it. I mean, so the arts were just like right there up front and center. And so tell me a little bit, why are the arts becoming more important during this time of social distancing?
You bet. You mentioned some people that jumped on right away. Right away. Mo Williams is another one who's doing a daily lesson for kids to draw. And he has a great quote right now to something, I'm not going to quote it exactly, but it's science will get us out of this situation, but arts are going to keep us going during this situation. I think it's a really powerful statement for him to make, because truly arts are what it is that connect us to humanity. If you look, historically, cultures that no longer exist, thousands of years ago, what usually is still around are the arts. Visual arts specifically, you can find remnants and artifacts of those things. So that idea that the arts can connect humanity is a really key piece to this. I also think it really helps with mindfulness and allowing us to just connect to our own humanity. There's so much power in behind expressing your feelings, especially during a crisis. I think that's why people are turning to dance and theater and music and visual art during this time. And there's also this need then to also, especially for young children, balancing the academic part of their life with the arts, just like we do in schools all the time, right? If we focus only on academics, we miss out on some great learning that kids can take through the arts. So those are really key. And then I think another piece, and I'm a big believer in research, because if we don't look at research and how it backs up what we do, we're missing a key component. Research shows that we have a stress-related hormone called cortisol. It actually lowers significantly after you've spent about 45 minutes of art creating. It's really,
so in other words, we all need to be creating something at some point, right?
yes, and it doesn't have to be visual art, right? I mean, if you're a cook, if you're a woodworker, there's so many ways that you can go about creating. It's a matter of finding that piece.
You mentioned civilizations and how that art is that relic that kind of keeps us connected to our past. It'll be really curious to see, and we're already like immediately seeing the results of people kind of responding to the arts during this time. I thought the same thing back during the hurricane with Katrina. Out of that whole area, a whole influx of music and different types of arts. And it'll be really interesting to see what stamps this time period in the history of our life and what arts do to kind of show that.
Yeah, in fact, the online art teachers K-12, we actually have right now, it's a journaling opportunity for teachers to join in. And we're already working with some really big names to potentially take this, to create galleries, whether they're virtually or for real. And so, yes, those things are moving already in terms of documenting kind of people's journey through this isolation, quarantine time in our lives.
Well, and that documentation, I think in the past it would like maybe be years before you'd see the doc, and now it's like almost immediately you're getting that documentation.
That's exactly right. Yes.
So let's see. I'm sorry, I'm a little. Talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've had as an educator in this situation, and maybe even share with us a little bit about. Not everybody's an art teacher, but we're all educators. And so what can educators and parents do to help use these arts to balance what's going on?
You bet. You bet. There are three kind of big ideas that we're kind of encapsulating this conversation on today. And the three main ones are helping adults, and it could be traditional teachers as well as adults that are in the homes. How do we help support this idea of creativity with children? So we're going to talk a little bit about that idea. We're also going to look at inspirations, because that's a key piece for art, and especially for little kids, when they don't have the experiences and the schema built in, they do rely on adults to help facilitate and support those inspirations. And then finally, which a lot of people ask about, is access to materials, because we know it's not equal across the board when we look at places all across the United States. So how do we keep an open mind about what it is that art can become? So if I love
that you're going to address the equity and how we can respond to that.
Yes.
So, okay. Sorry,
exactly.
didn't mean.
No, that's all right. I appreciate that. It's a conversation, right? So if we go back to the first one, adults knowing how to support creativity. I'm paid every day during the school year to figure out ways to do this, but parents at home who become teachers aren't necessarily paid to do that, but they want to still help support that critical thinking, creative thinking, that innovation. So I created a document that I believe is going to be shared out, and people can access it through my Google Drive. And I found through all my research over the last few weeks about 6 different topics that kind of relate to this idea of how we can support creativity at home. The first 4 we're not going to cover in detail, but the last 2 we're going to get in the other points that I talked about. So the first one I think is really critical is we're facilitators of learning and not managers of learning. as a teacher, I'm trained to be able to let the kids take the lead in what they're creating, what they're doing in terms of their thinking. Am I not there to support them and help facilitate? You better believe that. But I have to make sure that I'm not the one controlling all of the learning that's going on. So how do I support the child as a facilitator, but not manage every piece of it? That's a key piece to it.
That's yeah, super key.
Yeah.
Love that.
Providing space to create. This is one of those equitable situations again, right? Some people are very fortunate to have great, amazing spaces where children can create, leave things out all the time. And I think that's the optimal thing to be able to do if you can. I was very fortunate that I was able to free up a bedroom space in my home where I was able to now create that into my workstation and my studio and all that. It just makes you feel better when you can leave everything laying out, go in and create when you kind of get that spark of creativity. But that's not always possible. So
Right.
Are there ways that you're trying to support your child in order to find those moments to create? And it doesn't have to always be inside. It can definitely be outside as well. And I know we're going to talk about that when we talk about materials a little bit.
Yes.
I think it's also important, a key piece to art education is talking about art. So we can make all the art in the world, but if the child doesn't spend some time talking about why they created, what they created, some problems they ran into, how they might do it differently, what title did they give the artwork? All those are great things that the parent or the educator, if you're a traditional educator, can be asking children when the work is in process or when it's done. I think we miss out on key learning when we don't talk to them as they're going through the process. I think that should take place as well as when the piece of artwork is done with it.
It really pushes that critical thinking that comes out of art if you're posing those questions. Not questions so much of what is it, because that can kind of but more of questions of, and maybe you could share what would be some great questions to kind of prompt that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some great sentence starters could be, what if? I think that's an amazing question. And it could be, what if you changed this? What if you did this instead? What would happen if you would have chosen to go down this path? Did you think about trying this out? So again, I'm not managing it. I'm saying to the child, these are considerations that you might think about. It's just, as an adult, I have more experiences and more schema in order to offer ideas, and then let the child take off. If the child chooses not to do that, that's the child's choice, because it's their own student agency and their own voice and choice in what it is that they're creating.
And I just think that's so important. It starts pushing them to be reflective, and that's such an important skill set to have, to be able to reflect on things. And so giving them those questions or cue questions to help provide that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it too, because you're right. It goes beyond art. When you can reflect on something and respond to it, that's something you can do throughout your entire life. So I think that's critical. And then the fourth one that's on the sheet is displaying creations. Where is an important place in your home? Could be the refrigerator. That's pretty traditional, but maybe it's a fireplace. Maybe it's the child's bedroom. Maybe it's in the bathroom. We were talking about the bathroom earlier. I mean, it could be really any place in the home where the family sees value.
I literally painted my kids as doors with chalkboard paint so that they could just create on there. And it's funny, even as teenagers and young adults, they still go to their chalkboard.
We all stay young at heart, don't we? That's
yes.
Exactly right.
So.
Exactly. So we covered adults being able to support creativity. The second challenge we can think of is this idea of inspirations, because again, we have children that will ask questions, I don't know what to do. I think you had said.
I mean, you tell your kids, okay, it's time to do some art maybe or whatever, and they go do it. And then they're like, okay, I'm done. What do I do now? They've done 2 seconds of it. And I think that's a struggle point for a lot of parents and a lot of educators that aren't familiar with how do you push beyond that point? How do you help them gain that inspiration? So yeah, tell us a little more about how that can be facilitated.
Yeah, well, I think we go back again to those what ifs. Did you think about, how about if you tried? Those kinds of things can get at it. Again, when a child comes up and says they're done with something, you should encourage them to go further. You, as the facilitator, that's what I get paid to do every single day. So I want to encourage kids to do it. But ultimately, the child's in charge of their learning and their creativity. So you got to have them, be able to accept that that's okay if a child does something half finished and moves on. I don't know about you, Melissa, but as an artist, sometimes I will work on something for a while. I put it away, and I might revisit it 3 weeks, 8 months, 5 years, those kinds of things can definitely happen.
I remember artists once sharing at a conference you and I both attended that their process oftentimes was even that they started by going into their studio and just simply sweeping the floor, and that was their ritual every day. And just that sweeping, that methodical process got them into their kind of inspiration and creative mode, because it kind of detached them from everything else and kind of opened their mind up. It was just...
Yeah, because I think everybody has their own way of getting into it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes for some of us, it just happens like that, and we can just create. But there are some people that need to go through the rituals, through just ways of doing things in order to get to that mindset, in order to be able to get into their most creative way. I think the other piece to some of this too with inspiration is allowing kids to struggle through mistakes and problems. There is so much power in productive struggle.
Yeah.
Don't be the answer always for them. I'm not the sage on the stage for my kids. I let them struggle through it a little bit to find it, because as we all know, that's some of the best learning that can take place. I learn from my successes, and I also learn from my struggles and my mistakes. So I think allowing kids to go through that, and there might be tears, there might be some screaming. That's just
tantrum here too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I just think it's stuff we have to allow kids to go through in creating sometimes.
I mean, I literally experienced that myself just a little bit ago, because I've been working on creating something and ran into a struggle and had my own little tantrum about it, and had to say, okay, I'm going to put it away. I'll come back to it and process how am I going to do that. And it will become that greatest learning, because I will take away from it. So yeah, our struggles are an important part of the process in creativity, a huge piece.
That's exactly right. So we've kind of covered how do we help kids think of creatively, some inspirations. And the last piece that we want to delve into is just this access to materials, because we definitely know there's an equity issue. So one of the things that Lincoln Public Schools focused on when we created our units or our studies for kids is we focused on themes. So kids would be able to pick out from where their learning is and their understanding of a theme is. But then we also made sure we boiled it down to basic ideas. Maybe a child has a drawing tool. Maybe a child has some kind of a paper surface. And that could be, we talked about junk mail. We talked about the back of envelopes that you might have, wrapping paper.
Cereal boxes.
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots and lots of things out there. And then the last thing is this idea around objects, how we can create art through objects. And there's lots of things out there that people can do around that as well.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us about a little bit more about some of the challenges with access to materials.
You bet. Yeah.
What are I've seen some really amazing things online, even from colleagues that are doing these. I don't know if you've heard the Getty Museum Challenge, or you were sharing one about the laundry art one after the other day. And I was like, I've never heard of that. I need to learn about laundry art. Tell us about laundry art.
You bet. Well, laundry art is great.
Anybody can do this art. I mean, who does not have laundry?
We all do. And you can have children do this when it's still dirty, because it's a great sorting activity, like we talked about. It's a skill you all need to learn how to do. But basically, you would have kids sort it out maybe by color or by texture or whatever way, and then you can either recreate a painting. This piece of artwork right behind me, if I had the right kinds of clothing, I could recreate it in laundry. And then I think the key piece to that kind of art, because it's temporary, is to photograph it. So if you have access to a camera or to a phone, it's taking a picture of it, so that way you have it. And then that laundry can get washed. It can get folded back up and put away. It's just a really fun, creative way. Kids can reenact artworks using the laundry if they want to, or they can create their own original compositions. There's just so many possibilities.
I love the idea of tying this into skill building too, like house. So here's your chores, go gather all your clothes from your room. We're going to do laundry art. So one, you're getting them to pick up all their stuff off the floor, right? and then they create something that's like, okay, now we have it sorted and I can go start laundry and get it going.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Multitasking, and you're allowing kids to be creative. It's an awesome thing. And then the other one too that a lot of people is popular with, you mentioned to it a little bit, is the Getty, is reenacting things, right? So finding a famous painting and reenacting what that painting is, and then taking a photograph of it. You can do it all with costumes and props, or you can just do it with your body. I mean, it all comes down to what do you have around you. And the idea is that anything can be art. I think so many times people get this idea that art is just what hangs in museums and galleries, and we need to broaden what art is. It's anytime you create something. Now, are there different levels of taste and interest and skill level? You better believe it. But if we narrow what art means, the meaning of art, we're taking away from lots and lots of people out there. Art should be inviting and welcome to everybody.
Well, yeah, and because it takes away that opportunity for that process and all those skills that we just mentioned that can be developed through just the creation of it, because there's that critical thinking that's going on, the talking about their art and being able to communicate about it. That's another piece that could be captured in those, you take a picture of the artwork and then have the kid even video about what it is and share and express themselves. So it really starts developing those expressions and the ability to do that. This is fabulous. So I don't even know where we're at with time. You get talking with a friend and you just kind of like go off in this other world. So I just wanted to kind of recap a little bit, and then maybe we could have some questions if we needed to address that. But, the 3 takeaways that I heard you really kind of bring up is, one, anything can be art. We talked about laundry, and I literally want to start this like today and try this. And also just talking about how the arts can be kind of this medium balance. We're so much online and engaged in this space with students are with their schooling and whatnot, and just kind of being able to create can kind of take them away from that and create that balance that's needed in this time. And then also you talked about and brought up adult involvement and how important for that child engagement, and it's that you're facilitating versus, telling them what to do. God forbid, googly-eyed penguins, or something like that it's like, here, take these 3 shapes and make this thing with it. Let them just get their hands in there and make it their own, right?
Well, I often refer back to shows like Chopped. If people have seen the show Chopped on the Food Network, where everybody gets kind of the same materials, but then it's wide open to what it is that they make.
Yeah.
I think there's power in that, right? Let kids have some things. They might need some supports through some criteria or some inspirational ideas, but then let them investigate, let them work through the problems, and then talk about what it is that they created or in the process as they're creating. I think there's so much powerful learning that can happen from that.
That's fantastic. So I guess where are we at with things here?
Good on time. We did great.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good. I don't know if there's any questions.
You guys did great. So we'll grab one question. There was a couple here, but I'm going to ask one here. This one in particular kind of relates to the discussion, but how do you assess student work that is incomplete? Does that ever impact your feedback to the student? Because we are on time frames and time crunches. And then after this, you can wrap up with.
You bet. Well, I think one thing we have to remember is remote learning, emergency learning, crisis learning, whatever terminology you want to give it, is not in classroom learning. And so we have to know that things are not going to be done to the level as what it would be in the classroom. I have 50 minutes every 4 days to dedicate to creating, connecting, responding, presenting to art. And it's focused learning and it's group activities. It's me giving feedback. So those opportunities. So I think we have to understand that we are not going to be able to get probably to the polished work that we normally would get when we're all together, because we don't know family dynamics. We don't know if the child is very good at independent learning. I have a 15-year-old daughter. Without adults supporting her, she has struggled. And so everybody does it differently. And so if you're having to assess that kind of work, you're probably going to have to look at your rubric and decide what adjustments do you need to make if it's at-home learning. And guess what? It's looking like we're probably going to be in this boat in the fall. So I think you're going to have to look for sources out there like Online Art Teachers K-12, Common Sense, those kind of organizations that are supporting education to look at ideas around curriculum, instruction, assessment in order to be able to get the best out of kids during an online situation.
Do we have any other questions that are in the chat here or in our question answers?
I think we are good to go on the timing side.
Okay. All right. Well, then I just want to thank everybody for joining us. And Bob, thanks so much. I wish you the very best. I know this is a stressful time. On top of a stressful time, this is the closure of the school year for a lot of districts. I know OPS just had their last day with students last week, and now teachers are packing up rooms, so I'm sure you're in the midst of that. So thanks for taking some time out today and answering some questions and just having this great chat. And it's just so good to see you. I mean, this is so awesome to spend some time.
Well, Melissa, thank you for having the conversation with me. Thank you to Merv and Jennifer as well. And then Common Sense, what a great opportunity to give up. I was in on the one on Friday about engagement. What powerful opportunities you're providing educators who are really trying to find their way, and then supporting parents who have become educators, and how do we best help to support them. So thank you for offering this.